don't really feel like I changed anything. I can definitely say everyone else changed and the media changed and the world changed. But again, I'm a black man myself. So this is something I've known integrally, I guess is the word I'm looking for, long before I was a journalist. But this was like sort of an awareness of the nation hearing about such killings. I'm not sure that it affected my reporting at all. And that is probably because I had already been covering stories like this back since I was working in Arizona. And starting back as far back as maybe Trayvon Martin. And so I was used to covering stories like this, and I had gone down this road before. So seeing something like this happen on a national scale was just a smaller, it was just similar to the, like a microcosm of what we had seen with all the other shootings, black killings before that. And here is America is shocked to learn what many of us have known has been going on for centuries. Of course, you remember it wasn't just the video that lit this fire. It wasn't just the media reporting on it. It was the brewing of all these other killings, all these other marches leading to these protests everywhere during lockdowns when people don't have anything else to do. And I covered many of those protests in LA and Long Beach and even in Orange County, where you had people who, the protests weren't even remotely predominantly black people. These are all different races joining in this movie, all because people can see something that they can clearly see as an injustice. I don't know. I think we did a pretty good job. At least my reporting was again because I had been in this so long, and it was a time when stories that I had been talking about for in many newsrooms were being like, we don't have to cover that or blah blah blah. Now everybody wants to cover it. Now it's all front page news, and it was a good chance to talk about something that has been going on, like I said before, for centuries. And I do think there was a lot of confusion in how the media was covering this. And, it was also very confusing for people who didn't understand why everyone was protesting. And, there's mixed messages as to why this is important and lost in that translation. And I'm walking along these marches, interviewing protesters and asking, why are they involved? And their stories are so compelling. This was America's movement, and this time it couldn't be ignored because again, you're at COVID, everyone was locked down. They had nothing to do but watch the news, for better or worse. And then you had all these protests and marches in every city.
On the LA Times front too, of just definitely kind of watching the conversation in the newsroom happen online, right? Because we were remote at that point, and watching, the struggle kind of happen, like as, figuring out a language again, of like how to talk about like looting, let's say, for example, of just trying to figure out, how do we frame this? How do we frame that? Because basically, like, even the smallest word could really just dictate how a person understands an issue, right? And that's such a big responsibility to weigh on you, especially kind of in that moment when you're writing things like as you're out in the field, like you're on deadline, lots is going on around you. You're also worried about your own safety. And so, it's a tough thing to kind of do.
I think in these meetings, students were struggling to talk about these topics, especially as high school students. They're so young that they have an even harder time grasping why such a horrific murder would happen at the hands of law enforcement. So I think it was necessary for them to talk through it and to look at why this could have happened and what can be done to speak up against it and to make change. There were a lot of students wanting to focus on sharing their own opinions. There were a lot of students wanting to speak up for what they believe in and sharing their voice directly through opinion pieces, as well as there were students sharing feature stories to showcase a variety of student voices. There had already been a lot of other cases of police murdering Black men in this country. And that definitely was a breaking point for a lot of people, that this just continues to happen and it just cannot continue to happen.
I think as a Black man, I had first really woken up to my realities of facing of life that I have to face as a Black man during the murder of Trayvon Martin. I mean, I was a kid, but I just remember the TV being on all the time, and so I was always aware of that. But I think, of course, when George Floyd came through, I think what surprised me about social justice was kind of feeling like some of my peers around me, they were also speaking up in ways that I just did not ever anticipate or expect before. And so I think in that way, it can be very easy to see social justice as just a thing for disenfranchised folks or folks of color. But I was very proud to have a community around me of people who really cared about, advocating for the importance of, equality and inclusion and just social well-being after that. And so I think since then, I really have grown to see social justice as an opportunity to engage not only folks who look like me, but, folks from all walks of life. The immediate folks around me, they were very supportive. I had someone address me as a sleeping lion is what they had said, which I had never heard that one before, which I really appreciated. But I think I saw at that moment just how impactful it is to have a voice and to use it. Because I think when you do have a platform and you do have a position, et cetera, whatever it might look like, you have a responsibility to be a voice for so many people who don't have that same access. And that's been the catalyst behind my entire life so far. And so much of what I want to do with my life is about using my voice to help those around me. And then, of course, on the opposite end of the spectrum, there were those who questioned, my decision to speak out. And I don't have any regard for that. I could care less, truly, because, again, I think when you are blessed enough to have a position, to have a voice, it is your responsibility to use it and to wield it in a responsible manner, and to wield it for folks who are disenfranchised and don't have the same capacity to have a seat at the table like I did.
When I was 17 and had assault rifles pointed at me because I was speaking up against police brutality, specifically after the murder of George Floyd, I felt so confused, but at the same time, it lit a fire under me. It was like, this is exactly why I need to be here doing what I'm doing right now, because there's no reason you should feel threatened by a 5-foot, 120-pound, 17-year-old who is for the first time speaking up about her lived experiences and having racism and discrimination in her hometown. Like, I felt so confused, but at the same time, in a sick way, I almost felt seen by my community members. I'm kind of like, it was a big turning point in my community because I was one of the only Black kids who grew up in the city. Like, no one had ever seen something like that happen. That was so blatant and so obvious. To watch a kid kind of be under immediate attack as soon as she grabbed the mic to speak up. I remember it was June 6, 2020, and I got up on a flatbed truck, being one of the only Black students who could really speak on the Black experience in my hometown. And the second I stepped up, and there was a white guy who was talking right before me, the second I stepped up to get the mic, all of the cops on top of City Hall pulled out assault rifles and had them aimed at me. That was my first experience, kind of experiencing police brutality and really feeling threatened personally. And it was in public, people saw it and people could feel that emotional pull that happened. And I think for the 4,000 people who were there and attended and were able to see what was going on in real time, people started to visually be able to see the experiences that I'm having that are different because of my skin color, based on the fact that all I had to do was stand up there and hold the mic. It was people couldn't even hold space. They couldn't even hold space for me without feeling threatened that I was going to incite some kind of violence. When it's I'm not even 18 yet, I'm still a kid. And they felt so threatened by me, which is when I really realized, even at 17 years old, my voice holds so much power and has so much weight. I decided I would lead a protest across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And my message was to lead with love and to see at the end of the day, like, we all have this ability to have empathy and feel for people's lived experiences. And my whole life I felt, because of my race and my skin color, growing up in an area where there was no kind of representation, that I was othered and I was different and I wasn't accepted or loved the same way that other people were in my community. And I really wanted to start an organization that really empowers youth voices, because for the first time in my life, I felt like the Black Lives Matter movement and the death of George Floyd kind of incited my ability to speak and kind of break that ceiling that was above me, that always silenced me. And I realized, like, I had to be a voice for those who were silenced, and that was a privilege. And I wanted to make sure that other Black kids and other Black kids felt that empowerment, and through turning our pain into purpose and using that as a way to liberate ourselves, because at the end of the day, like, no one is coming to help us. It's truly in, like, our ability to heal is in our own hands, and we can't expect other people to help us work through our generational curses and our generational traumas. Like, we have to look within ourselves and understand that through the painful experiences we have, we can turn that into purpose, and we can use that as motivation to serve others. And so my organization essentially does just that. I'm the founder of a nonprofit called Youth Advocates for Change. And I founded the organization as a direct reaction to the murder of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I teach workshops rooted in critical consciousness and this approach to organizing and activism and social justice through a framework of reflecting on your lived experiences, finding motivation through that, and then taking action. And that is kind of what the ideas that were birthed through the pain that I was facing during 2020, the summer of 2020.
Growing up, I played water polo, which is a predominantly white sport, and I'm also from Santa Cruz, California, which is a very predominantly white area. And during 2020, I was a part of a national winning water polo program where I was the team captain and the only Black individual on the team. And unfortunately, we did have an incident where it was during the time where schools were wanting to implement critical race theory into the curriculum. And we had a parent send out a mass email through our coach to our team. So it was kind of really uncomfortable, and I didn't want to say anything about it. But as team captain and the only Black person on the team, I felt like it was necessary to talk with my coach and my teammates. Only I could really stand up for myself, being the only Black person. And even though my teammates also felt it was wrong, they kind of like leaned towards me to talk to our coach about it, which made me really uncomfortable because I was trying to pursue a college scholarship in water polo, and he had all right over my playing time and letter of recs. So I was really nervous about speaking up to him, but I ultimately did. And it was probably one of the best things I ever decided to do, because I hadn't really spoken up about being like Black. I kind of had to put aside the athletic side of myself and more the Black woman.
I didn't have a lot of people, but I had quite a few people that were like nervous about going to some events, or like, nervous about even just speaking about it. Basically just saying, what, anybody who would view you a certain way, or anybody that would judge you for trying to spread awareness about this very serious issue, is not someone you want in your life anyway. So that was a lot of like the concern. Even with me, like for some odd reason, I felt weird at first about like reposting about it and speaking about it, because I was like, oh, what if people don't want to hear it? But I was like, who wouldn't want to hear that? Whoever doesn't want to hear that, they can just unfollow me. Like, that says a lot about that person. I'm speaking on something that involves me directly in my community. And if you don't want to hear that, then. So I guess I was just helping other people that felt uncomfortable about speaking about it be more comfortable about speaking about it.
I think the art just was really important to bring that into the forefront. Like, I did his face like 6 feet high, just his face on every building. You couldn't forget like why we were there. I think the visual part was really important, just because like that whole outrage came from visuals. It came from video. You know, if there hadn't have been video, it would have been just another lie that someone would have said something else happened, or, you know, you can't prove it. And like, no one could even really put into words how horrific that was. I think that that's like my real gift is painting the dead as a kind of a way for people to connect. It was like, you know, really helpful for people because people would come up to the murals and be crying while I was painting. So there's something, you know, about being able to capture that part of the face. Because you'll make it look like them, it looks like them, it looks like them, and then there's one part where it crosses over and you're like, they're here. I mean, I think the same when you talk about people after they've passed, people that are close to you, when you kind of conjure up their memory, and like we do at funerals and wakes or like celebrations of life, when we talk about them, it feels like they're there. And when I paint people, there's a point where they're there. I feel them, you know, it crosses from a painting into like almost a portal. And I'm like, oh, they're here with us right now. Very moving, very emotional. And probably the most powerful of all the kinds of painting that I do.
I am a content creator that focuses on anime and blurred culture. I'm very proud of the community and the people that I have surrounded myself with, not only as a person that loves anime, but as a person of color that loves anime. And I have built my page to extend to others of like-minded ideas and creativity to join me as we learn to be ourselves in a way. I have used both my platforms, both TikTok and Instagram, in different ways. I have utilized Instagram more for my poetry and raps that I have done in support of Black people and the Black Lives Matter movement, especially as a person of color myself. I've done remixes to quite a few songs actually, and I have used my platform to motivate others to realize that though we have come a long way, that there is progress to be made and that there's still a fight to be fought. Especially when it came around to incidents such as George Floyd and the impact that in itself had amongst the community, to not only reflect that yes, we are divided, but to also see the positive in how united we are, that we can stand for a cause together and continue to stand for a cause together. I was in Georgia at the time, actually preparing to move to LA. I was back home with my mom and my sister, and you know, I heard the news regarding George Floyd and was just angered and also just disappointed and sad. That was the first time I ever saw something such as that being talked about so widely. And, you know, fast forward to 2024, same people that were so vocal back then, it's just like crickets. And I've noticed that there's been this huge shift in terms of just, you know, advocating for Black lives. And with having such a large platform, it's important for me to be an advocate for not just myself, but for others too, whose voices are overshadowed by, you know, their oppressors, as well as using my art, whether it be modeling or makeup. I try to just use that to convey how I feel and really give my perspective through the lens of, you know, a Black American. And I can't separate that, my arts from my real life. I think they all just intertwine with each other, you know? So I did see an impact with me bringing awareness with the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality and just talking about my own experiences. I don't always have to be showing this artsy side of myself. Like, I'm not a product, you know? I'm a human being. I bleed, I cry, you know? So yeah, still inspiring me to this day, just to utilize my platforms and bring awareness to things. But also, I will say and emphasize, being Black, I also remind myself it's not my job to educate those on their own ignorance. I think at the end of the day, that's, the individual's responsibility to educate themselves and unlearn all the biases that they've learned growing up. In 2020, I sort of just wanted to also remind people that, yeah, I'm an artist, but also I'm Black and I'm a human being, and this is my life.
That impacted me in my writing by like causing me to use my writing to tell stories, I guess so. I mean, it was always kind of politically acclimated in a way. George Floyd is not the first case of police injustice inside of America, and I never will claim it was. In fact, it really isn't a new story. I think what was new was that we had the full footage of it. But I guess that kind of jump started me to start writing a movie about it, actually. I'm always influenced by the stories around me. I'm very empathetic. I'm an empath, and there's a lot of crazy shit out there. I guess I see my writing only talking more about political activism and just talking about topics that I feel like are not talked about very often. Talking about different cultures, different people, different stories that different people have that are just not sharing them or don't know how to share them.
My business is Glam by Ava, but originally it started as Ava B. Braden. I taught myself how to braid during COVID, during lockdown, actually, just kind of to have a protective style. But I remember the first time I wore braids was when I went to the protests in downtown Indianapolis, which is where I was. I just didn't grow up getting my hair braided, but it's something like I've obviously been surrounded by as like a Black woman with Black culture. But it was important to me to like accept my hair in a new way that felt affirming to me. So yeah, that I think it impacted me and kind of wanting to showcase different parts of my culture, my Black culture, and being very proud of it and being able to like put my hands into something so beautiful that I felt could just like, I don't know, it was healing in a way, I think, with all the things going on in social media, especially like how out there things are now, how much things are shown. Like, unfortunately, like George Floyd, that was not the first case of, a Black man being brutally murdered. It's just one of the first extremely intense visual showings of it. For me, with my brand, I always go with my motto is beauty is as beauty does, which is a sentiment showing that how you act and who you are, that is what will show your beauty. And so I want my work to be showing like it takes inner work to reflect the outward beauty. And I try to emulate that with my day-to-day life, but especially with my business. So because of what social media is now and all the things we're seeing all the time, I really try to make my business a kind of like beacon of self-love and positivity coming from the inside out.
Do you remember where you were when you saw the video of George Floyd?
I was at work that day when I first saw it, and we had to, because of it happening, I've been in youth development for a while now, so we had to have that conversation with the youth to get their opinions and, be able to mobilize them as well. For them, it was like they were upset, like, and rightfully so, because it's like we've been seeing this, going on, and they've got to watch it, on the internet, like replayed and on the news over and over again. And I felt like the youth were hurt and, they felt scared. And for me, it was like, seeing so many people behind it, it was like, for me, it was a real point for me to get more into organizing. And watching, growing up and watching, all of our elders that have been doing this work, they're getting older. And this was like kind of like the time of the passing of the baton from, my elders to my generation to keep this work going, because it's been going on since, forever. And, they've made their progress and strides, and now it's for us to take the baton and go even further with it.
How has working with youth inspired you?
Oh man, they inspire me every day because they have fresh ideas and new thoughts. So it's like, for me, they inspire me to look at the world differently than what it is that I've been taught, right? Because sometimes, as adults, we get caught up in the way that we've won or lost before, and we let those things in a sense cripple us. But youth, because they haven't been through the same thing as us, they have fresh eyes and new life, and they got the time to do it.